you see it recently? You just muted yourself, Charles.
Are you talking about the children thing, the children movie?
No, Ikiru.
What are you talking about?
It's called Ikiru.
That was the Japanese version. No, I didn't watch it.
Yeah, well, not a problem. Let's save the discussion of that for the end to make sure we understood this one to our satisfaction. It's the third time I've seen this one. Sorry, the second time. And I liked it very much when I saw it. I was a little disturbed by his performance. Now, granted, he's playing a cold, indifferent man until the beginning, but I felt it was too much underplayed. What did you people think of him? When did it take you? How long did it take you to warm up to his personality?
Long
Anybody
time.
want it? Cindy, when?
Quite a while.
Quite a while. When he got his diagnosis, is that what turned you around, or after that?
No, when he accepted it and changed.
Accepted his person. Oh, so that's very deep into the movie. That's like an hour.
Yeah, I mean, that's when I really connected more to him.
Yeah, the change happens at 1 hour and 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But who's
according to my notes. And that's very unusual. It's one of my issues with it. Yes, Susie.
I think that he played the part exquisitely. He always does. I don't know if he's ever had a happy role where he was a happy man. And I wonder if he's a happy man when he's in his house or whatever he's doing. And I think it was very, very appropriate for him to, or appropriate is not the right word. I didn't expect him to change. I really didn't expect him to change. I think a person that has a personality like that, for whatever the reason might be, it takes a death sentence like that to snap him back into snap.
Right. Well, in a way, that's what the film's about, isn't it?
Yes, it was.
Very much so.
Has he ever played a happy role?
What?
Has he ever played?
Yes. You have to see a film called Love Actually, where he plays. And I did we see that? Maybe not, but
no,
a lot of people have. It's a charming film with Hugh Grant as the romantic lead, playing the prime minister who falls in love with his secretary. And there are many characters in that piece, and he plays an aging rocker like Rod Stewart.
Oh my gosh.
And he is joyous. He's the Elton John of, of the film. It's a charming film. I mean, the kids love it. It's a romantic comedy, but it's very well done by a Brit, of course. And it's worth seeing. So, he redeems himself.
Thank you.
Oh, Marvin Alperin, or one other.
Okay, Marvin. Marvin, maybe you better mute yourself if you can. Lower left corner. There, thank you.
Nothing affected him, Jim. Nothing. He was one way, a monotonous person the whole way across. I don't mean that unkindly.
I know that.
I liked who he was, but I wanted him to kind of snap, like Cher said, snap out of it. But he just kept on going no matter what happened. He was just himself no matter what.
But he was boring and dull and interior. He was trapped. He was unreactive to the world until he found life in this young girl. Now, when I watched it this afternoon, I made notes as to when he actually smiles in the film. And he smiles quite a bit. They're kind of fleeting. He certainly does it with her, Miss Harris. Let me see if I can scan my notes.
When they went out for dinner, didn't they? When he was at dinner with her?
Even before that. Let me see. Let's talk about the opening of the film. What's your impression of the 4 co-workers that Mr. Whiting meets at the train station? Anybody remember that?
Yes. He was
what, Marina? You're muted.
And they are all kind of frozen. They are all paper cuts. They are one-dimensional, and they are all afraid of each other and of their superiors.
And it's not clear why they're that way until they meet the superior. They see him through the window, right? And he doesn't get to even go into their cabin, you know, on the train. He takes a different car. And then they meet at the other end at the station, and he emerges and greets the group and waits for them for the waves to part, and he walks through. And then what happens, there's a very little move that I just noticed this time with the umbrellas. Did you see it, Marina?
Yes. The
Middleton.
The deputy, the second in command, holds the newbie, doesn't let him pass. So they all march in a hierarchy.
Yeah, you're right. It's like they let the boss go first and give him his space. So they're all kowtowing to Mr. Williams. And I find it very remarkable that we sort of get the social dynamic right away in the first minute, you know, in the first opening. We don't know what it's about. We don't know who this guy is. We don't know if he's cranky or not because his face is so neutral and there's not a clue as to what he's feeling.
Yeah.
So let's approach this.
Jim,
yes.
I didn't see the Japanese version, but that opening segment to me felt very based on Japanese culture.
I didn't review it, so I can't attest to that. Maybe Risa can, because she's our in-house expert on Ikiru, but no need to pipe up now, Risa. But that notion of discretion, of quietude, of restraint is very Japanese. That's across the entire culture historically. Minimum brush strokes in illustrations, except for some of the graphics with the waves breaking. You know, where you see lots of detail, but still, they suggest a lot of feeling without saying it. It's called emotional minimalism or artistic minimalism. And you see it in their pottery and in their theater, except Japanese, you know, have a very emotional side. And anybody know what kabuki theater is? It's opera in Japanese, where people wear extreme costumes and makeup and headdresses, and the roles are performed like an opera, or a melodrama, grand gestures and very much overstated feelings. So it's like not that they don't feel anything, it's that the preferred cultural ethos or communication medium is restraint. You see it in Japanese modern architecture too, as in other forms of modern architecture, but it's a very telling trait. I once asked an Indian student of mine why Asian cultures are this way, Eastern Indian. And he said, well, you know, Americans are very brash and outspoken and extroverted, and we're not. So we have learned how to tell our stories without yelling at people. And now, you know, it's ruined me forever. Now I'm going to watch every Asian film I see, you know, with that, through that lens. But that's how they do work. And you recall The Third Murder and Shoplifters by Koreeda, Japanese filmmaker. We discussed Drive My Car, the Korean filmmaker. The Photograph, the Indian film about the lower caste boy who wants to court a middle-class woman, and his grandmother comes to town, and he has to pull off the masquerade that she's his betrothed. There's a certain kind of storytelling that these films have that's we find delightful. If you've seen any other Indian films you like, we've seen The Namesake. Lunchbox is a very popular one that's very Indian. And look for the films of Mira Nair if you want to see great Indian storytelling. But let's keep going with this. Our first introduction at the office, somebody walks in with some paperwork, and it's Mr. Singh who says, this other department sent it back to us. And he takes it and he files it away in his stack of files.
Mhm.
And he says, well, it won't do any harm to keep it here. So how is that an aphorism that can represent the whole film? We'll get back to you, Natalie. Susie?
Well, I think it ties in with the girlfriend, the young woman, saying, I don't know if Mr. Williams heard her because I got the feeling the desks were also close together, but reference to the Empire State Building. And at first I didn't get that. I thought that was so funny when I got it, because you keep your pile so it looks like you're busy with your work. You keep your pile so high. So we all have to have an Empire State Building on our desk. And he filed it in there. And I think it just is, that's, you know, maybe he'll get to it and maybe he won't.
Yeah. Yes, you're correct. Lisa?
They all had piles. They all were holding.
Yes,
They were
they
all
did. They all had
saving
Empire
things.
State Buildings.
What did that mean? That they just weren't very ambitious?
I'll let Risa answer that. Risa, you're muted, I think. Go ahead.
I'm not muted. I wanted to say that from before that I found this, even though I saw both of them, I found this very English. If you had never seen
Yes, right. It was. Well, look at the time.
movie and the people and the personalities, that's a very English thing. And if you don't know that it has a Japanese root, you would never think about Japan at all. And I tried very much to separate them. But I saw it as the same English kind of straight-laced kind of thing. And I thought
it was.
I thought that his personality was vital for us to understand that there was no personality in any of the people, and that it was important that we knew that. So I thought he was terrific. I really thought he was terrific. And I joined him right away that he had set up his office exactly the way he wanted it. And then it turned out the whole building was the same way.
Yeah. He was nominated for an Oscar for his performance. So somebody saw it.
So.
Did not win, of course, but got the recognition that he's long needed. I've been watching all of his films, or as many. There's one recently that is not worth watching, but it's not his fault. You actually see him get angry. We also saw Sometimes Always Never, about the Scrabble playing family and the alienation of the son. He was the father in that. Yeah, that was fun. But
isn't this when, because they were so important to the plot, the three ladies?
Yeah.
The girls.
Yeah.
What do you call them? The ladies. Isn't
The ladies.
that when they finally got to come in? They were waiting for 2 days to be able to see him, and he dismissed them so quickly and go see this one and this one. This reminds me of when I went to get a teaching job down at the Board of Education. I must have gone through 40 offices before someone would interview.
This goes back to my question. What is the personal meaning to him of it won't do any harm to keep it here? It's like out of sight, out of mind. If I don't give too much of my own personality, nobody will bother me with feelings. That's the relationship of the bureaucracy, how this idea of a child's playground in a sewage slum, a decrepit, it's 12 years after the war and they still haven't repaired the streets. That's how things like that are allowed to go unnoticed, because these people the three ladies have no voice. They keep getting shunted from office to office because the bureaucrats don't want it. It's that they can't say yes, but they can all say no. It's like so many things. Their way of saying no is saying you're in the wrong place. It's a distraction. They distract your intent with process. And putting the file away in the stack of papers, I don't know if they're all like that or they took their cue from him. Obviously, if he had been an activist boss, they would have been activist workers under his command. But since he wasn't, they weren't. They're all dressed the same. They all have the same conduct. You know, so they're all playing to their immediate boss. And there's a very interesting scene before we see him in the office. There's a dark shot of a hallway. His head is bowed down in shadow. Who passes by him? Sir James, a knighted member of the government who is in charge of everything at the London city center. And he defers to him, right? And if you recall later in the film, what was his goal in life? Anybody remember that? He's talking to Ms. Harris.
To be a gentleman.
What did he mean? Arlene, what did he mean by that? Who is he referring to?
Himself.
The guys on the, when he was a boy, he saw men on the train platform. Yeah. Just like he became, and like his mini-me's did too. It's very much like the mini-me. I worked with an assistant once, and he left that company, went to work at another company, and he got the same kind of haircut that the boss of the company had when it was new and not all the rage. And, you know, it's like the 7 habits of successful people. Gee, if I get up at 6 a.m. and run 2 miles, maybe I can be a millionaire too. You know, a little more to it than that, but people, they displace, well, I won't say that they displace methods to success, because it limits your success when you're limited like that. In our culture, and today, especially with all the entrepreneurship that we say everybody should have or they're a failure, it's no longer dignified to be a mid-level worker, you know, because the stars are Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Elon Musk, and it's like they're the celebrities that shame us because we're just workers. When I was working on The Apprentice, I came up with a saying that the world is composed of 2 kinds of people: the shameless self-promoters and the rest of us who do the work. And these are people who opt to, I'll just do the work, go home, you know, and it's a big cultural problem because people, you know, you read about it all the time, about loss of community, lack of engagement. It's work and home life, and that's about it. And people are dull and boring. And this guy, being a widower, right, is adrift and alone. His wife died just a year or so before. And his son and his son's wife have moved into his house. And he keeps himself from them. He keeps himself from everybody because it will do no harm if I just keep myself shut away, because no one will ask. You see how that works psychologically? And it's this theme of the whole movie, that if nobody champions these women, then nothing will get done. And it's staring him in the face, but he can't embrace it because he's allowed himself to deteriorate to this level of, I don't care. I'm not important. Nothing moves me because I move nothing, or I move nothing because nothing moves me. And, you know, it's a lot about his soul, the way he talks to himself, the way he thinks, his self-concept. And granted, you know, we've all had our encounters with bureaucracies, whether it's work or government. And it does deviate or deteriorate into that very often. I found this funny. Go ahead.
Oh, and yet he went after this girl, which I sort of found that was kind of so out of character for him. He saw this lovely girl and he approached her, and he didn't mean anything romantic, but he just wanted to be with her. Maybe some of her personality would rub off on him, perhaps. Maybe that was his thinking.
Well, there's that scene in the bar, but let me point out, I'll ask the question, maybe other people can identify it. When did he invite her to lunch at Fortnum's?
After he went to the doctor and found out.
That's right. After he got the news, he wanted company. Maybe not to spill the beans, but just not to feel so alone.
Not to be alone.
Right. You see, and they have this lovely lunch, complete with ice cream sundae, which was a rarity for a working girl like that. And post, this was like 57, 50, the original was set in 52. I think they pitched this a little later than that.
The restaurant he took her to, I've been to, it's very lovely.
Yeah, well, it's a symbol of class and success, and he's splurging on himself, and she's so surprised you'd invite me as well, right? So of course she says yes, and it's just
Didn't he go? You said it before that. He went down to the beach and he met the guy.
Yeah.
And he told him his situation.
Yes, right.
Because he needed companionship.
Yeah, I'm sorry I jumped ahead. You're right. We should discuss that first. Does the writer at the beach town remind you of anybody? I say a young Orson Welles. If you've seen any of the early Orson Welles movies. And he was a writer, he was a playwright. Maybe it's Brendan Behan, who was a British playwright or novelist. He wrote Borstal Boys.
Oh, he's the one that took him to all the bars.
That's right. And that's quite a montage, isn't it?
That was fabulous.
Okay, so Cindy, here's a tough question for you. When he's singing the song in that bar, the one that his wife loved too, did that help him soften for you?
A little.
Mm-hmm. Why? I mean, what did he expose of himself? If that's what it, you know.
I think it was more in later on where I really warmed up to him.
Right. Okay. But you see, that's giving us a taste of his past. And he says, this is my wife's favorite song too. He doesn't say she died recently, but we know that, I think, at that point. He's very drunk. I mean, it's kind of funny, right? This director has kind of a way of mingling the pathos with some humor. Like he's passed out on this woman's shoulder before he gets up to sing at the piano. And then he's overwhelmed with feeling when it comes to the point about thinking about his mother at the end of the song. Mm-hmm. And he has to, be let out, or he goes out on his own. And then something interesting happens. The young playwright goes out looking for him because he's taken him on this bender to show him how to live life. And Williams comes out of the darkness and he's got a handkerchief with blood on it. He spat up some blood, but he hides it in his hand. Let's put it away, no harm keeping it hidden. And then they go back in and the script show continues. It's kind of funny that the whole point is that the writer is showing the man how to live as only a late 20s, 30-something passionate writer can do, boozing it up and going to raunchy places, watching this script show. And when they go back in, the script show is approaching its climax, excuse the pun, where she's taking off her top and the whole place is going crazy, right? But for these two guys, it's such a wonderful touch that Williams is exhausted and adrift in his own loneliness and his fear. And the writer is so moved by the song that he had just sung that he can't enjoy it either. He's more concerned with the drama unfolding in this man he's just met. I think that was a lovely moment. And, sometimes you just got to watch these things a little closely and say, what's the person feeling? Risa?
When he said, when he said that he didn't say it, but we saw it. He hid the blood, and it's exactly the same thing that he did with the file.
File, right? Yeah.
So he didn't help himself either, if you will. He just
he didn't
want to share it.
It's like if nobody sees it, maybe they won't know.
It won't, or maybe it's not there.
Or I don't want to trouble you, like
right.
Like I don't want to deal. I don't want to deal with it. Maybe later.
It's a bit of denial.
He says to Miss Harris on the street, well, let me make up to you the fact that I wasn't there and I couldn't give you a reference and I'll take you to lunch. He's more concerned about the inconvenience for her than about his diagnosis, or at least that's the surface of it. He knows he he can't even say it. He says, well, I just learned, no, I won't go there. He waits to tell people because he doesn't want to burden them with his diagnosis and doesn't want to make them feel sad. I know when I lost my father, after a couple of days, somebody bumped into me at the supermarket and said, how you doing? And I said, okay. And then I was speaking to one of my brothers on the phone and I told him the story. And I said, what's that person going to do? It's like, why burden them? And people are always at a loss for words when you spring something like that on them. And I felt it was, a little white lie that was good for both of us. But this guy does it as an MO, as his modus operandi throughout his whole life, has been. He even asks himself later, when did I get this way? By the way, in the film, if you want to see another film of his, it's called Hope Gap, 2019. And he plays a man in late middle age who is leaving his wife, invites his son to the summer home, the seaside home for the weekend to soften the blow. And he's the same kind of character. He just doesn't show anything. But he does get angry at some point. And by the way, the wife is played by Annette Bening, who's just terrific.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really good. Where she says, you're killing a marriage. What do you mean? We're all involved in this. Marina?
I wanted to go back to The Office if we can.
Yeah.
Because I think that a person doesn't always live frozen or dried the way that the main character is presented to us. The new person who came to the office, he wants to change. He wants to help the three ladies. And everybody else in the office looks at him reproachingly for his enthusiasm, for his desire to make a change, and kind of hinders his urge to make the change. So maybe Mr. Williams also was young and aspiring and striving to make a change, but then the system stopped it. Maybe he wasn't always like that. He wanted to be a gentleman. It doesn't mean that he wanted to be unfeeling or unhelpful.
Right. It took him on a path that he couldn't control because the system exerted a lot of control. Clearly, all those offices were hierarchical and rigid, and nobody wanted to rock the boat. And we see examples of cruel and unfeeling bureaucracy, have seen it in films forever. American Westerns and Cool Hand Luke and so many others where people get denied at the window or the bank window. It's a trope in movies. But he set the tone for his own office, and sometimes you become the organization. You become too accommodating, and you don't notice it. I mean, yeah, Mitch. Yeah,
I kind of thought that the whole LCC was run like that. The parks, the public. I mean, it wasn't just his office.
No,
Sir James created the mood that went down to all the offices that this is the way we're going to operate. He was the leader that said, "Don't do today what you do the next week," and so I think that was not just his department, that it was all a department. But I also wanted to comment,
Whole building.
the movie reminded me of the Harry Chapin line, I grew up just like him. My son grew just like him. And it seemed like he wanted to be the gentleman that he saw when he was 8 years old. And then we see his son emulating so many of the characteristics that he had too.
That's what Teenage Rebellion is all about. Oh my God, I'm so much like them. I can't stand it. You're angry at them because you're like them. Those of you who have daughters may know something of that. It's the pain of differentiating themselves from you, realizing there's a personhood that has to be born. And then they realize how much you love them and cared for them. And it all works out in the end, usually. But let's go back.
One other comment, Jim.
Yeah.
Did he get the cue to go to Bournemouth from Miss Harris when she was chatting in the office? Because wasn't she the one that said Bournemouth is a good place to go?
Yeah, he's in the doctor's office, and there's a other woman patient, and the receptionist who say, "Where are you going this weekend?" "Oh, we're going to Bournemouth. We go all the time." She serves a lovely supper. Maybe that's where he picked up on the word.
Good point.
Yeah. That's very subtle. I'm glad you pointed it out. But there's something else that we have to pay attention to. He goes home with the news from his doctor, and he sits alone in the dark before his son and daughter-in-law come in. And he has a series of memories, and he looks to the left and there's a memory, and he looks to the right and there's a memory. And there are all kinds of memories. There's soccer, there's coming home from a war or on leave, dad at the cricket match. And those memories of the past are impinging upon the present. He hears in his own mind, Dad, and he thinks that his son is calling to him, but his son is not. And that is like another one of those clues where we see expression on his face. There's some pleasure, and then there's not pleasure when he realizes it's just a memory. It's a very interesting montage. It's very unique in that the character is ambivalent about it. We don't see that very often. And then the next day he doesn't show up at the office, goes to the beach, befriends the writer. I don't know who that character is, that actor is, but I thought he did a great job without even saying stuff. And he even, in the cafe, he gives him the pills, the medicine for the cancer, right? "I'm not going to need these anymore," he says. And the writer picks up on, oh, he probably thought of killing himself. And then William says, "It'd be too inconvenient." And the writer says, "Yeah, for your no." The landlady, he said, the writer says, "It'd probably be too inconvenient if you killed yourself." Not so many words. He says, "Yeah, be inconvenient for my landlady." Doesn't want to make trouble for anyone. He's such a decent man.
Jim, I thought that he was saying, "I'm not going to commit suicide, so here's the pills."
Yes, he was.
That's the way I read it. I thought it was sleeping pills.
Yeah. I don't disagree. But the point is that the writer intuits why he was hoarding all this medicine, and he says, "I know what you were thinking, and but it's probably too inconvenient for you."
Jim?
Yeah.
I want to back up just a little bit to when they were at the dining room table, the wife and the father and the son. I felt that the son was so intimidated by his father. And I don't know what it was that the wife wanted him to speak up and tell his father.
Jumping ahead. You're jumping ahead.
You're jumping ahead.
Oh, that's ahead? I thought the table was...
Okay, we'll come to that, but
Thank you.
Somebody in the neighborhood observed him at Fortnum's with a young lady, and they were gossiping.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And the husband was actually intimidated by his wife. We can't have people talking about this way. You have to confront him. And of course, then we see that she's concerned about him frittering away his savings on a girl when he should give the house to them because they really need it. So she's not a favored character, but people do. You see, because he didn't spill with her, she can treat him. She can dehumanize his needs that way. The son doesn't. The son, hesitates on the stairs before he goes up because his wife called him. He hesitates, he turns, he looks, but he can't do it. The apple has not fallen far from the tree. The son knows how to hide his own feelings too, and to suppress his needs to those of somebody he's trying to please, like his wife. So let's move on.
Wait, I wanted to say something.
Yes, Arlene.
Yeah, I wanted to say when he came home that night and he was thinking, but then the son and the daughter-in-law came in, he wanted to tell them, I think, what was happening, and he kind of wanted them to come in and talk, and they wanted to run up and go to their bed. And I think he would have told them if they had gone into the living room with him. That was my impression.
No, it was mine too. And I'll tell
I think I agree. I think so. I think he wanted them to know.
But here's the thing. After having led this kind of life for so many years, he's not able to swim upstream. It was easy for him to excuse them from the conversation, even though he had emotional needs to talk to them, because they had another agenda and he just caved. So we hurt ourselves when we adopt this kind of lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Some people do better with it than others. Some people, perish. Some people just become drug addicts or commit suicide or just live lives of quiet desperation. That's not my line, but it's some poem. So he explains, let me catch up with my notes here. Okay. So he's on the street and she sees him, and they go to Fortnum's and they have lunch. And she goes through all the nicknames of the people and he's smiling through those. I noted that, because he's amused by her observation. They're all true. He even guesses the guy in the other department who's Caesar, and then it comes to his name. And he doesn't even know what a zombie is, but his name is Mr. Zombie. And she has the foresight to explain zombies to him as dead but not dead. Which is the same as saying you're alive but you're really dead inside. She's describing him, and he quotes that later on in the bar scene much later after the movie. That's a very strong scene. But the filmmaker is telling us what we know, and that's a form of reassurance. Did that not resonate with anybody by that point? It's okay if it didn't, but it's like that's the train this movie's on. He's dead but not dead.
Yeah, said it. That's true.
And then there's this very sweet montage of them doing things together in the park, walking, the movie theater,
sitting on the bench.
Sitting on the bench, right? Okay, the bar scene happens later. But he finally goes home and he's rehearsing, telling his son the news in the mirror. And the son and the wife are having an argument about, tell him this is terrible. The son at first doesn't want to, and goes off and reads the newspaper, and then resolves, yes, we can't have people talking about us. I'll definitely bring it up at dinner. And of course, the wife, tries to lead the husband into opening the topic when dinner is served, and he won't. That's very funny. Did some good performance there. And the husband skates through that. Again, it's the same thing, let's put it aside. It can't do any harm. It's very interesting that the couple can't speak either. They can't, the wife can't, she tries to lead into it. It used to be what happens in London, stays private, but now it's not that way anymore. And he agrees with her. He's not going to fight it. He doesn't know what she's talking about because he's done nothing wrong. And it ends there. So it's how this kind of, I don't want to say passive aggressive because he's not aggressive with his silence, but is this passive role, passive style that infects everybody around you. And that's really a key message of the movie. And then we go back to the office for his return. And there's some very interesting slow motion sequences in here when he's returning to the office, as he's approaching his chair. with some very sort of old time post-war music. It doesn't sound like jazz until the trumpet kicks in, and then it's a sad jazz, and we go into real time and real motion. And I don't know if you've noticed the music, but there's a very light, semi-big band sound. It's very melodic and soothing. It's almost like do no harm, music without personality until the trumpet kicks in. But the trumpet kicks in with melodrama because the film is telling us this is a bad situation. Natalie? Just stretching that hand out. And there's several slow motion sequences like that. By the way, when he's going down to visit his doctor from the office, he passes an engraving on the wall, beautiful engraving in marble, to all the war dead who used to serve in that office. So you see, he's parading in front of the other dead, except they were really dead and they lived and died, violently. So it's a nice little touch. It doesn't make it a great movie. It's just, that's the filmmaker thinking. And when you have Bill Nye in the lead role, looking morose or blank even, he carries the scene anyway. It wouldn't matter what was behind him.
Mhm.
And that's the thing, you can underplay something to the point where it's not there, but he doesn't, because there's something about he does a lot with his eyebrows and his eyes. And that's what's all speaking. And he just, he doesn't get the recognition he deserves. Okay, so they go out again. He asks her to the movies. And then he takes her to the amusement park, and he misses the rabbit, but she gets it. They have a drink, and she says to him, the big conversation, you're so much older than I. People will talk. And he's already visited her at Fortnum's when she's a waitress, and people will talk. He said, some people will think you're infatuated with me. And then he goes into his explanation of why he wants her company. He doesn't say, I'm dying quite yet. But he says, when I first saw you, you had an appetite for life. That's a tagline from an early Arnold Schwarzenegger movie when he was a young bodybuilder. And it's called, I think it was called Stay Hungry. And the tagline for the movie was, if you have an appetite for life, stay hungry, meaning starve yourself and lift a lot of weights. And she says, no, you don't get it. I'm not special. I'm just ordinary. And to him, that kind of specialness, that freedom to be herself and enjoy the simplicity of her life does make her special, because it's not what he has. And he wants what she has. And he says, look at her. I'd give anything for a day to live a day like that. I hope you'd show me how you do it so I could do it too. And this is just such a lovely scene. And she's weeping in it. And it ends with a tear dripping down. Now that's where he says, how did it happen? What was I becoming? And then I looked at you in the office, and then she cries.
Jim, I think it was a cue too, that he was listening to her off-the-cuff comments when they first were in the office. He heard all of that and realized she was different than the other four guys.
Yeah, because she was the only spark plug there. And she was going to leave. So that happens. That scene is very pivotal. That happens at 1 hour into it. Cindy, did that scene win you over? The scene in the bar? You're muted.
Started to.
It's okay. You're a tough sell, but okay. And then this movie is structured in a very unusual way. Let's take Marina first. Go ahead.
Question, please. The girl is in an office. She has a steady salary, and she can sit all day among pleasant-looking men doing some paperwork. and she leaves it and goes to be a waitress. I doubt that a waitress is making more money. So what do you think is the reason for her to leave?
It was the promise of becoming a manager.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, she expected more money than she eventually got. And also, she was such a spirited person, these people were stifling her. She couldn't wait to get out of there. So she's the only one who had the courage to leave.
Yeah.
You know,
So she flew the coop, right?
Yeah, right. Right. Arlene, did you want to say something before you run off?
No. What the only thing I was going to say was that at the Portman's, when they were at the restaurant, I don't know if you picked up on it, but in the corner, it showed it. There was this woman, and that was the neighbor.
Right. Witnessing them.
The story.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't very obvious. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. And that's the lady we see on the street from the window point of view, talking to the wife. So that's how the wife says to the husband, you better talk to him, they're gossiping.
Correct.
But after this,
put a light on.
so after this scene in the bar, that's 1 hour and 5 minutes into the movie. It's 2/3 of the way through it. And then he dies. The next scene is the funeral. Right? Yes, Miriam. Unmute, please. Lower left corner. The microphone. There you go.
The casket scene was a little too abrupt for me. Here he is, walking, talking, quite alive. The next scene, he was in the casket. Now, perhaps that was fine for the movie. Perhaps they didn't want to drag it out, make it long. And perhaps they especially wanted to avoid his deterioration, which had to be obvious, and how he would decline before he actually left the world. He did have cancer.
Think of all the money they saved by not shooting the funeral scene.
Absolutely, all the money, and didn't have to get all those props. Didn't have to go there. And
these decisions are very real when you're making a movie. He may
have to have people speaking at his funeral or any of that, and perhaps saved everybody disappointment at the way they might have handled it. Might not have done it well. And then there he is, walking, talking, very alive, and then they are at the funeral. So that was rather abrupt.
Okay, so that was abrupt for you. Was it okay for anybody else?
I think it was okay for me.
Okay, and then it was okay.
Yeah,
it seems you get used to it, because then they cut to the wake afterwards, or the bereavement. You know, you speak with the family. That's a very telling scene. Yeah, Natalie.
I want to get back to the his girlfriend and her job as a waitress.
Yeah.
I think that was very important in connecting that with his obsession with working up his whole life to get to the top. He was the head person in that firm, correct?
Yes.
And I think what they were saying in this film, that it is very hard to work, to find good work, to work your way up, the struggle of it. And when you get up that high, how serious you have to be all the time. And so much of your life and your time goes into your job so that you keep it. Because without the job, there's no money to survive. And so that the girl who thought she was going to go off and leave her place there and get a better job and be a person in charge, that was an example of it doesn't work a lot of the time. And I think what happened to me, the theme in the film was that, and that's true about so many people we know, that you have to put all of yourself into a job when you work yourself way up high. and there's nothing else. That becomes your entire focus. And I think that is why he didn't have a relationship really with his son or anything else. And it was just when he found out he was going to die in 3 months that it hit him like a brick in the head that he has had no fun. He has had no friends. He has had nothing else except this ambition of staying and being in this job. And that was also related to the fact that they put all these little things off on that folder of his, when they're putting it high, because it's very difficult in government to do these little things when the money is given by people to put into the bigger things in the community. So there was a lot about life in it. It was just a movie, but I found that the reason in the end that he became so good about helping those young women was that made fun for him. That was a fun experience.
Okay, you're absolutely right. Let's save that discussion for a few more minutes.
Okay.
So that after the funeral scene is very telling. First, Waveling tries to ask her out, Miss Harris out on a date, and of course he can't and gets interrupted by the son. And the son has a mission. Yeah, Miriam, could you mute yourself, please? And he can't bring himself to ask it until he finally does. And he says, did my father know? Because we didn't know. It happened so suddenly. And she says, I don't know. I don't know what to say. And then he says, because if he had known, it would have been, and he trails off. He doesn't say, if he had known and not told me, I would have been devastated. But it's all unsaid, but we know what the feelings are that he's referring to.
But we know she lets him know that she knew. She doesn't say it, but she lets it be known.
I think it's up to
that's
him.
why he cries. Because he told her and didn't tell him.
That's right. That's why Harris cries.
Yes. So she let him know that she had been told.
No, I know, I disagree. I think she's crying because she had to lie and because she's missing her friend. The son isn't.
No, I'm certain that she.
Okay.
Right, I had the real feeling that he understood from her, and she said it without saying it. He knew when it was
okay.
Not exactly.
You've been to England more times than I have, I guess. So I'll take your word for it.
But what struck me was when he said that if I had known I wouldn't have let him be cold like that. And that kind of
right.
Because we didn't know what had happened at that point.
Yeah. See, the son's reaction didn't live up to the promise of, oh my God, he did know and he didn't tell me. He's contemplating what he would have felt, but I don't think he comes to the full realization. So that's why I didn't go where you went, Risa. Well, but we're on the cusp of that. The whole point is
it's clearer from the other show.
Fallout hits everybody around a person like this. The son, Miss Harris,
everybody.
And then there's a very interesting part. Refresh your memory, Risa, because I'm going to ask you about this. The train sequence. That's 10 minutes later after the change, 7 minutes after the funeral. And sorry, but it does.
Yeah, go ahead.
Every second counts. Believe me, that was my job for 40 years.
I understand.
No one will see that. Yes, but they'll feel it. No, we have to take it out. It's like that's the discussion.
I understand.
You have to eliminate all the inessential,
right?
Until the next seemingly inessential thing you remove makes it all fall apart.
Right.
So it's the brick wall theory. You can take out a couple of bricks, nothing will happen, but you take out the wrong ones and you blow it.
You lose the audience.
You lose the audience. Right. No, exactly right. And we've seen plenty of films where they go too far or you're way ahead of the audience.
Right.
So let's talk about the train scene. The four guys are on the train, all in their bowler hats. And they're, it's many months after the funeral, or maybe not many months.
Not many, yeah, not many months, but.
And by the way, before we go to the funeral, it's come on, we're going to the website, the site of the future playground in the rain, opens his umbrella. And we're going to come back to that when the guys start reminiscing about the site. And we start with that shot of him opening up the umbrella again. And they don't really go out in the rain, but we pop to them in the overhang there, looking at the water-filled site.
Walking through it.
Yeah. So, so that's the first reminiscence. The second reminiscence is, and there are four of them. They go to the planning, Hart was his name, the functionary who accompanies him to the planning office. And he tries to present the file to the head of planning. And he says, oh, no, give it to me. We'll take care of it. And William says, well, I'll just wait till you can, and I'll sit here in a chair. Hart, go back to the office and mind it. And he sits down and very, almost proud of himself, a bit of a smile, sits there, and he waited the whole day in the chair. That's that vignette of a memory that Hart has. Somebody else, he goes to a man named Jones in the Parks Department. And he and Wakeling are carrying boxes of documents. And he says, you must take a look at these. And the guy says, yes, I will. Whether he intends to or not isn't the thing. But then what does Williams do in that office? He goes and he shakes everybody's hand. Mm-hmm. Nobody's ever done that before. Nobody has ever acknowledged a functionary in another department unless they had to. And he goes out of his way to thank them with both hands, right? To touch them, not just to shake their hands. And that is his way of charging them with responsibility for taking action here. So he goes to the grassroots level. And then the big one, he goes to Sir James. And Sir James says, no, we have other things to spend our money on. And he stays behind just after Sir James mixes himself a whiskey and goes back to talk to his buddies around the fireplace. And he said, excuse me, I'm begging you, I'm begging you. We don't hear the begging beyond that. But the guys in the train says, well, perhaps he did know. And then we see him leave a meeting and tell the ladies, don't be discouraged. There's a way out. Something will happen. I don't have the time to get angry. And that's all you see of it. But one of the guys in the train who was there at the time said, I think he may have known. And then Wakeling says, I don't know. Would any of us have done it? And this is the great challenge to the audience. Do you, audience, have the courage to take action in such a place where it's safe not to take action and there's some jeopardy to taking action? Especially, remember, by the way, this is post-war England. Very tough time of recovery. You think Italy had it bad. England did have it bad, although not as bad as Italy. But that's why she goes off to greener pastures, because I don't think these functionaries made much of a living anyway. And she could get tips and meet more people, and and she was going to be a manager. Times were tough. So jobs were very hard to come by and very difficult to get and to keep. And the challenge to everybody in the train compartment is they don't know. Then we go back to another flashback, visiting the site, and he's finally in pain. He doubles over briefly, and then they bring a chair, and he sits down, and one of the ladies brings him tea. Very sweet set of montages here. Again, like him sitting alone on the couch. In the beginning, it's one level of reality and another, and they're intertwined. And Waveling says, he sets an example for all of us, for each of us. And then Middleton says, let's make a pledge to never allow ourselves, we'll aspire to his level of engagement. And they all say, here, they agree. And then it's kind of happy. This is an hour and 26 minutes in. We see Wakeling courting Harris, walking in the park, doing things fun together. And then we go back to the office. And that courtship was necessary to have an interlude. Remember, they've all just pledged on the train to do good work as a bureaucrat, to get things done. And then we're distracted because we see this budding relationship begin to grow. And then the first scene back at the office is a shot down the stairwell. And you see people going different directions, up and down, just ants crawling over this stairwell. And that's the workaday world, isn't it? It's everyday man, right? It's Madison Avenue, it's Manhattan streets, post-war, imagine crowds of people, or Tokyo, people going about their business. What does that read as? Back to normal. Right. And lo and behold, a file arrives from Mr. Singh again about some school that needs some work done. And Middleton, now at the head of the table, and the other three are willing to hide it, can do no harm, right? The same way Williams hid that file in the beginning. And Wakeling rises because he feels, wait, we're violating our pledge. But even he doesn't have the courage to speak up. Mm-hmm. So you see how even he was never a crusader. I mean, in a way, this shows how we are all tested. You know, are we going to be bystanders, or are we going to solve this problem, even no matter how small? And then we begin the reading of the letter. And this is a letter that the son gave to Wakeling in the basement of the church after the funeral. We don't know what's in it, but it's personal and confidential from Williams to him. And again, the flashbacks continue. We visit the playground. In the letter, which we hear voice over the playground work, he says, don't reduce yourselves to a state of like mine. You know, don't do it. Take modest satisfaction in what you can do. Right? You don't have to be Jeff Bezos. Right? And then Wakeling goes at night to visit the park again. And we hear the same song as we heard in the bar in the beach town about Rowan-Tree. And he's singing it himself while swinging on the swing gently with a light cover of snow. And Bobby, the policeman who sees Wakeling observing the playground and it's empty at night, asks him if everything's okay. And they get to talking about the playground and Mr. Williams. And the officer shares his story of how he thought maybe the man was mentally ill or in trouble, but he decided to let him stay there singing on the swing because he seemed so happy. And this is reassuring for Wakeling because he realizes this is proof to him that somebody else saw it as well. This made the man happy. So, of course, this is what energized him. It's his quiet way of living out his last days and getting something done. And it's this notion of modest satisfaction that's in the letter about this playground may vanish at some point. Somebody will tear it down or something will happen. You know, we haven't made a monument to history. We've just done one little small thing, but you're allowed to take pleasure in that. Which is another cute, sweet, quaint, and really heartfelt message of the film, is that we all can't be superstars, you know, and but there are things we can do to give life meaning. And this is what what Williams was looking for after he got his diagnosis. He realized my life as I live it now is meaningless. I have no emotional relationships. People are just hangers on around me, and we coexist. We don't have relationships. And a very telling moment, I think, that adds an emotional closure to this piece is that when Wakeling leaves the policeman, he puts his hand on his shoulder, a point of contact. Very sweet. And it sort of confirms for us what we were feeling as we watched both the men share their feelings about Williams on the swing. And then we go to kids swinging, and the final shot is on an empty swing with the others also empty behind him. And it's like that image means remember the little things, take pleasure in the little things, you know, because that's all that's left you. So I like this film much more when I saw it this time. The structure is very unusual, that all the action happens after the fact, after he's dead, and it's told in flashback. You know, an American film would have turned it into a drama of bureaucracy, and how does, you know, one small man like Charlie Chaplin fight the bureaucracy and get this thing built, you know, and the frustrations of the various people in the bureaucracy. No, it's not that kind of film. Not at all. It's not about process. And this is where I'm coming up for Risa. This film is about the other people around him. Yes, his story is the primary story, but it's why did they have such a hard time seeing it? They were in the room with him. They were complicit. They were just as dead as he was, but it took a death sentence to make him realize it. And they had to bury the guy and then do this debriefing to figure out, yeah, he really did know that he was dying, and he did it his way. So it's kind of funny and it's telling, you know. So I don't mind that structure because it's very abbreviated. Those vignettes, you know, of every man telling his story of the little piece of the action that he witnessed Williams doing, it's fine. You know, you don't need to see the whole scene to know what happened in it. No, I'm going to stay here until you sign it. You know, done. That's what it is. You know, it's his gently playing the system against itself. So that said, I want to ask Risa, who saw and studied seriously Ikiru by Kurosawa, what she thought about that film and how she can compare it to this one, because it does take a very different tack on these issues.
Funny that you say that, because I was surprised that it was so much like the original, almost to the dialogue.
Which did you see first? Which did you see first?
Japanese.
I see.
And it just repeated itself in the other with minor differences. For example, in the Japanese movie, she calls him mummy, doesn't go to zombie. That was kind of like a nice little change. It made sense. I thought it was better. The interesting thing was the discussion among the men happened very differently.
Yes.
It was at the wake.
Yes.
And it was a very long scene. And what happens is all the big shots from each department leave. And you're left with our group, our workers in
functionaries.
Function in this department. They get drunk. They're celebrating at a wake. And this whole decision to become better is in a drunken state. But they take a very serious vow. And of course, they don't live up to it when the time comes with the second request for the school. And they don't respond. The other thing is, you're very, very clear in the Japanese movie, and you see it, that he dies on the swing. He does, and that's what I thought the policeman was saying, that he walked away and then he came back, or somebody came back, or it was the next morning, and they found him dead on the swing.
That would explain a lot.
That was left out of the second movie. The other thing that we didn't talk about is that song. That song, the first time it was sung, and I was listening to the words, it was a love song. And it was about love and marriage. And you got the feeling this guy wasn't always dead. He had a beautiful, loving relationship with his wife. He wasn't dead at home. And when she died, he died completely because there was nothing at home for him. He was going crazy with his children and what they were doing and how they were treating him. And that was very moving to me. From the minute that song was sung, I knew exactly what was going on with this man. And it was heart-wrenching. The whole thing was heart-wrenching. I enjoyed the Japanese, and I really did. And I was kind of shocked. I mean, we've seen movies that are based on other movies. Is it ever that close with just these minor, not that they were minor, they were important changes, but is that normal?
There's no such thing as normal in a movie. That's the problem with studios. They want something like something else. They set out to do it their own way.
So you don't get it quite this close.
Well, I'll have to see it again now that you said that. I saw the Japanese movie after I saw this the first time a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
What impressed me about it was that the drunken wake goes on forever, and everybody has a speech. It's much longer than the 10 or 15 minutes that the flashbacks take here. And they really, I mean, they really parse the details, and they try all these theories about what made him do it, and did he know or did he not know? And in a way, I saw that as a critique of Japanese society as being so dense when it comes to things intimate. Because some of the things they said were like, no, we saw it and it wasn't that way, but you thought so because you didn't know him, and
but they came around at the end.
They did come around, right?
They came around, and they all agreed that they had blown it with this man.
Yeah. Not so here, because the other guy, three others go back to normal. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean,
I loved watching the two movies, though. I thought I was really happy.
Interesting.
I was really happy that you did that, because I had never done anything like that before, and it was fascinating.
Well, you try another thing to do. I mean, I'll mention other films that are like the ones we're seeing, but it's also fun to watch a film twice. And I don't know how many times you've done that, but your favorites from our discussion group, you might watch again after you see them, and have a whole new way of reacting to them and enjoy them more deeply, even, I hope.
I'm sure. You pick up more detail.
Yeah, and you're with it. The narrative feels stronger because you're understanding all the nuances, and then your own imagination can go deeper into it.
It's funny. The first movie I ever saw, when my mother brought me with a girlfriend of hers, I was so young, and we saw South Pacific. Oh. Mm-hmm. And we stayed and watched it a second time immediately. You didn't have to leave the theater and pay again. You just had to sit there. And we watched it again, and then I've seen that movie maybe 15 times since then, and I love it every time. Love it every time completely. And that's how I felt this was for me. I haven't done that very often at all. See the same thing twice.
No, nobody does, because it's but it's like these films are made with I don't want to say premonition, but they are designed, they're written and structured in such a way that, one, you don't really notice it, and two, it really holds together.
It makes a difference.
And you're so engaged because it holds together, you don't know how they did it. I tell my students, we're going to show you how the sausage is made, but you're going to love it even more because you'll appreciate the artisanship, the craft of how does it do that magic to you.
Yeah.
And the more you know about it, the more you savor the filmmaking.
That's what you've been giving us.
Well,
all of this was to try to watch the film with a little bit of a different eye at the same time that you're just watching the story.
I mean, what do we do here? We just kind of decode the scenes and talk about how they worked on us. It's But if you don't, if we didn't have the discussion group, you'd see and say, "Oh, thanks, Jim. That was a nice film I saw. Bye." And it's like that's why I'm so selective because I don't want to put things before you that don't make you think or feel. That's for me. Marina.
I wanted to piggyback on Risa's comments because the song that we hear two times, the first time as he was singing, he broke up at the verse about mother and started crying. And the second time he sang it to the end and enjoyed singing. And to me, he was the most alive on the swing in the episode where he was dying in the snow. And I think several mentions by the son of the cold and by the policeman may assure us that, yes, he died on that swing.
Okay. I miss things too. All right. It's almost time to close it out. Our next meeting will be 2 weeks from tonight, Thursday. Tell your friends because we missed a few people tonight. I'm a little guarded about it because we have more attendance, but I'll do this for small groups. It's fun, and I keeps me sharp sometimes. The next film, we're going to go ahead and watch two films, not in the same night, and they're very different. It's a matter of tone. There's an Indian drama. Risa, you saw it already, called White Tiger, about a poor boy who doesn't know what the internet is, and he goes to work for a kind of oligarchic family in India, and winds up doing them one better after he learns how corrupt they are. You saw it like a year or two ago. I asked you about it, Risa.
Yeah, I remember.
You don't remember? Okay. Well, you can see. Oh, yeah.
But not all the details.
Yeah.
I'll watch it again.
Okay. I will too. and then there's there's a lot of action in that and a lot of drama. And then there's a quiet drama with Emma Thompson, who I just love all the time. And it's called The Children Act. She plays a judge who has to decide whether to order from the bench a boy with leukemia to get a blood transfusion. His parents are Seventh-day Adventists, and so is he, and a believer. And he's refusing the transfusion, but he's under 18. And the judge can order or not, him to take the transfusion. The parents are out of it because he's a minor, and the courts have final control. And
what's the name of that one again? What's the name?
The Children Act.
Children Act.
Yeah. And there's a real act in Britain about where the state has a greater role in the child's welfare than the parents. We have laws like that too, but this was passed some time ago. The film was made, I forget when, 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago. She's just terrific. Stanley Tucci plays her husband, and the boy is also terrific. It goes in a very unusual direction, very much like this, where I don't want to tell you. So my question to all of you is, which should we see first? You want to see a glum British picture again, or do you want to see an action movie from India? They're both terrific.
India
for Risa. Okay, change of pace.
British.
Yeah, I mean, there's some crimes committed in the Indian film, but they're nothing too graphic. Okay, so let's see White Tiger. I think it's on Amazon 2 weeks from tonight. And it is fun. I mean, if you like action movies and caper films, but it's really a drama, and it's also about its social commentary, and it's about revenge. So there's a lot going on in it. And the characters are very winning. And there's a distinction between the son of the family went to school in America and met a woman of Indian descent, and she's gorgeous and flamboyant. And that's very much a part of the story, and the difference between an American-born Indian and an Indian-born Indian. Yeah. Mitch? Yeah.
Yeah, it's on Netflix for free.
Okay, Netflix.
Yeah,
So I'll send.
$5 for fine, and maybe we should pay the $5 so we can get the strikes over.
What?
It's gonna be a while. It's gonna be a while.
What's the Japanese film called? What was the name of that?
Which one?
Ikiyu.
What? How do you spell it? Like living, like the film we're discussing.
Yeah.
What's the name of it?
Which film? The Children Act or
No. The first one from tonight.
Oh,
Yeah.
Ikiru. Ikiru.
IKIRU. And what's on? Is it on any station?
Amazon.
I think I saw it on Amazon.
Yeah.
I think it was on Apple TV too, I think.
Oh.
Check that first.
What I usually do is go onto Google and see where it's available and get the free one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good, I never thought of doing that.
That's why we're on strike.
That's right.
Don't tell Melvoin.
Oh, no, well.
You're on the list, Risa.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that'll be 2 weeks from tonight. And then the following 2 weeks, we'll have the Children Act. White Tiger first, then Children Act, and very different films. And there are a lot of good ones that still haven't come out on to stream yet. We will see. We won't see Return to Seoul. That's about the adopted woman from France who goes back to Korea. I didn't think it was much of a film, but then there's Desire to Leave or something, a Korean film about an inspector who has to investigate a murder for a woman for the murder of each of her two husbands.
Oh.
Yeah, it's very unusual, and he falls in love with her, and it drives him nuts almost. But it's done in very much the style of Drive My Car. It's a little slow, it's talky, very well acted, and very well plotted. And there's a bit of a mystery there. In a way, it's like Third Murder, about the Japanese defense attorney who has to defend a man who seems to want to be hung for the third murder he's accused of. And so it's a bit of a thriller, but and there'll be more because it's going to be a good rest of the year. All right. Well, thanks for a very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You.
Okay. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Jim. That was good. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good to see everybody.
Good night. Wait a minute. Cancel. What was one more? Stephen.